Want insight, encouragement, and the truth about writing, speaking, and creating? Welcome to For Writers and Speakers, the Called Creatives podcast with myself, Alli Worthington.
And I'm Lisa Whittle. And today's guest is the incredible Kimberly Stewart, a novelist of 8 novels and nonfiction, and a speaker and a coach. Can't wait for you to hear this incredible author tell you some secrets that you're going to want to know. So let's dive in.
Kimberly, welcome to the Called Creatives podcast. Lisa and I are so happy to have you here.
Well, you already know I'm thrilled to join you. Thank you for the kind invitation. This is so much fun.
We are absolutely thrilled. You are the classic creative. You do a lot of things. My guess is people will often say to you, so what is it exactly that you do? When you get that question, how in the world do you answer?
Well, typically I lead with, I clean a lot of toilets and walk the dog and just bear down as we raise our children. And then the second thing I do is kind of a hodgepodge. I know you two totally identify with this. You're right. I guess I would call myself a creative in a few different spheres. I write books. I help other people write their books, get them out in the world. I do some speaking. I have a couple podcasts. I have a writing coaching business with a friend named Bob Goff. And so we do a lot of events together for that. And so it has been a cobbling. There is a cobbling together of what I do.
We're already having too much fun, by the way. We were off air. We were laughing about a million different things. We were talking about if we could do anything else, what would we do? I was saying if I had 3 other lifetimes, I would be an attorney. I would be a chef. I would be an interior designer. I think one of the things, this actually has relevance, and I want to hear from you other things, because, by the way, I've also done other things. Like I've been a pool water tester. I have been a makeup artist. I've been all these kinds of things. But here's what I think people are the most interested in, because they see someone like you who's really successful. You've written a ton of books and they know where you are now, but they don't know where you've been. And so they think, well, does she magically just become friends with Bob Goff? Does she start doing all of these amazing things that she's done now? Has she ever had moments that she failed at anything? And
heavens.
I think that's the thing that people are right. That's what I think too. I'm like, if you only knew how many things I'd failed, good grief, far more than I've ever succeeded at.
Totally.
I think that's what people want to know about. How do you even get where you are? Share with us anything you want to share in all that conglomeration, nuggets, where you've been.
Oh my God, Lisa. First of all, there is a lot in there. Yeah. I don't even know how you just said, what was it? Chef? What was the third thing? I remember lawyer.
Interior designer.
An interior designer. One of these things is not like the other. Right. I feel like you're going to need to follow up on how exactly attorney slipped in there. Here's the thing. I know the two of you are absolutely in the same boat. If anyone says to you, gosh, you really have had some success, I honestly look behind me. Like, what? Really? Oh, because I'm paddling furiously under the water most days thinking, okay, Lord, is this it? Now, is this the direction you want me to go? First of all, I would push back a little bit on what even success means. But the heartbeat of that question for sure is, how do we, as creative people, as women who are looking to build something that matters with the help and the grace of God, how does that look like? What does that look like on a Monday? I would say a ton of prayer and surrender and a lot of humility. I just can't remember a time when I made a plan that it just worked A to Z. Never. So even the stuff that I'm doing now that I really love, I started writing 18 years ago. We just had the graduation of my middle kid, and he was in utero when I started writing my first book. And so I like to remind people that a lot of the things that kind of get some traction and grow roots take a long time. It is circuitous, this route, right? I was a high school teacher. I loved it. Loved teaching Spanish. I lived in Latin America for a while. I taught ESL. I stayed home with my babies once we started that phase. If I could take that girl, she was a girl, in my hands today, I'd want her to hear compassion in my voice and so much encouragement to be patient. I think a lot of times we get ahead of ourselves thinking, okay, well, now it's time. I've decided it's time. It should be here, whatever the it is. That just has not been my experience at all. Lots of good things take a long time to grow. I will say, be encouraged if you're in the middle of how will any of this connect? I'm in a season of harvest right now, and it's been a long time coming. There's other stuff going on too that's not so beautiful, but I'm looking for the good. I'm looking for the evidence of the goodness of God, and I'm seeing it big time in the way that I've had all sorts of weird jobs, some of which I thought this will never connect to anything. There's no way I'm going to use this ever. I don't actually really even like it. And turns out nothing is wasted. It really isn't. I'm even telling that to my teenagers and to my college students. Nothing is wasted. Even the job that you think, oh my good gracious, I only want to do this for a summer. Even that, you're going to see weave in and out of things coming down the pike. So take heart. Nothing is a zero. There's always stuff being poured in.
I love that. So 18 years of you really just gently grinding away, writing, putting your stuff out there. The thing is, it's consistency. It's not letting yourself self-sabotage. It's not taking yourself out of the game before you get a chance to play. There's so much of that, right?
Yeah.
But are there things you can look back in the 18 years where you go, this thing I did right here, that unlocked something, or this skill needed to be up-leveled and I invested in that? What are some of those high points that you can look back in your career and go, that was a touch point for me. That was important.
Such a great question. I don't believe there's any time as a writer in particular, as an author, where an investment in the craft itself is a bad idea. We get a little bit whipped up as people who are outward focused, right? I know writing is quite isolating and quiet in your yoga pants. The gentle, I don't want to say gentle grind, Alli. I mean, you kind of brought us there, so we're going to go. But it's most writing is on your own, by yourself, in front of a laptop screen. It is not a very glamorous moment. But we do that outward facing, right? I think unless you're journaling, if you're writing a book, if you're writing for an audience, you do have your eye on what's beyond the page. It's easy to start thinking of that part out of proportion to also being a better writer, learning how to be a better writer. All along the way, I've tried to invest in that piece of things. Sometimes it was really painful. I've gone to conferences that were more deflating than encouraging, right? So you have to be careful what you're letting into your heart. I mean, oftentimes, even those experiences, I learned something. There's something where I can move the ball down the field a little bit. And it feels totally indulgent to do things like that because you're investing in helping to become better at what you do. And you might not be charging very much yet for the output. And so it feels a little funny, but I just would encourage you to do that. I was in a writer's group for a long time that it just felt like I was never going to go anywhere with this. And those, Monday night meetings almost felt self-indulgent. Like, shouldn't I be, organizing a closet or, I don't know, writing a letter to the senator or something? And I just kept going. And even those times, especially those times, taught me how to talk about my work, taught me how to interact with other people about their work, which is what I do on the daily now. So again, those things that feel like small investments, I look back now and think, nobody was watching. I definitely wanted to throw in the towel on a very regular basis. But I'm glad I didn't. Just as you said, Alli, don't take yourself out quite yet. The game hasn't really even begun oftentimes. But when we decide, well, it's too hard. Nobody wants this. Careful giving the no to something there where the question isn't even out of the mouth yet.
That's so good. So often we do disqualify ourselves before we're even told no. And that's one of the biggest problems. Well, you have written multiple books. You have a nonfiction book that's new, but you have written 8 novels. Is that correct? Yes?
That's correct.
Yes.
Well, 9 if you count the one that's buried in my backyard that neither of you will ever see. And no one knows where it is.
Strangely, I understand that. I understand that. I have multiple books that are not actually ever going to see the light of day. So,
No.
but 8 novels that have been published, and that's amazing. I have such respect for fiction writers because that's something I've never tackled. And so that's always kind of looming out there in could I, would I, all those kinds of things. Here's what I want to know. And I know this would take more than probably our whole show to get into all the nuances of it. Talk to me about what is the difference or a difference between writing fiction and nonfiction that has really stood out for you.
That is a delightful question. First of all, chef, interior design attorney, I feel write a novel. I think it's pretty much a given if you decide to do it. I would say there are actually more similarities than differences. That's kind of where I'm landing right now. You're right that my first nonfiction book just came out not too long ago. And it was in part really difficult to write because I couldn't kill off difficult characters because they are real people in those stories. And so that was unfortunate because when I tire of someone in a novel, I think, wow, she's out of here. Unfortunate disease. And that's it. It doesn't happen in real life. And also I was writing a book about grace. And so that's a double whammy. You can't kill off people you don't like when you're writing a book about grace. So there was a little bit of a in-your-faceness with nonfiction that there was no other option but to be brutally honest. So the vulnerability piece felt a little bit alarming to me sometimes. The similarity was that I have such a passion is a little cheeseball, but something like that. I've got a bee in my bonnet, maybe, about the power of good storytelling. And I think that goes for every genre within non and fiction circles. If you can tell a great story, if we can allow ourselves the freedom to use some of the hacks of fiction writers in our nonfiction writing to get people into the room and to help them feel something, their shoulders relax and they will listen to you and they will lean in. When I think about the two genres, I think when I began to kind of look at doing they felt like two very different things. I thought, okay, well, now it's nonfiction. And turns out a good story is a good story is a good story. And it takes a lot of time and patience to let that story unravel and untangle. The beats of a good story go in a nonfiction book just as well as a fiction piece. I loved writing fiction. I loved writing books that I always said they were Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan situations where there was banter and chemistry. But if you ask me about my 50 Shades of Grey, I have like a half a shade of one shade. I'm not a 50 shadeser. And so I would write these rom-coms that were just supposed to help us move into entertainment. But also there was this little byproduct of grace over and over. So it's kind of funny that I ended up writing an entire book about grace when I can look at those other 8 books and say, oh yeah, I was totally talking about grace there too. I loved that phase and I might do that again sometime too. For your listeners, I will say there are a lot of times that I just didn't fit the mold for that. I was writing, as I said, kind of chemistry-driven, rom-com, quirky characters. And so for the Christian market, I was a little too sassy. I'm sure you're shocked about that. And then for the mainstream market, I didn't have enough smut. I mean, I'm using that word. They didn't use that word, but they did tell me we need, sex scenes and we need the scenes to be raunchy. Those were actual editorial comments. Yeah. And so I never really felt like I was in the right spot. So for those creatives listening that feel like, gosh, I'm not sure if people are hearing me. I'm not sure if what I'm putting down, people are going to pick up. The readers were happy. The readers responded. And sometimes I had to be the one to advocate to the powers that were, no, they're out there. They're out there. Sometimes we have to be the strongest voice in our advocacy because we are boots on the ground. We're the people interacting with the folks that will love what we're doing or will be able to get something, gain something, learn something from what we're doing. Sometimes you have to have a little bit of fierceness in the way that you stick with that stuff.
Amen to that. And that works for fiction or nonfiction, of course. Right. Now, going back to fiction, I'm sure there's so many women listening right now going, I want to write fiction. I have no idea where to begin. I have no idea what it could look like. What do you have to say to that woman thinking this right now?
A few different things. First, demystify. So do not overthink yourself into paralysis. And by that, I mean, put your tusher in the chair and start hammering out words every day. See what happens. A lot of this is a grand experiment. You can't know everything before you just try. So I'd start working on the word count. I'd pay attention to books that you love and start consuming them, not as a reader, but as a writer. So watching and seeing, now, why did I love that scene? Why did I hate that scene? Why does this character grab me? Why do I want to throw this book around up across the room? And then another thing I would recommend is there's a lot out there about, again, the beats of the story and the hero's journey. A lot of times I've found the most helpful resources in that area are from screenwriters. Screenwriters are forced to tell a really great story in 90 to 100 minutes or 90 to 120 minutes. And so they've done their homework. Sometimes novelists, me included, just have another scene here where I talk about the wind. And then I'm going to talk about the movement of her hair in the wind. And sometimes fiction writers get into a little bit too much, oh, this is beautiful language, and they forget about plot. So I would recommend looking to screenwriters as great mentors of how to get to the good stuff. You can always fill in the wind and her hair later, but reader, the goal as a writer, nonfiction and fiction, is for the reader to dunk her head in that book and not want to come up for air. And so one of our jobs as writers is to have so few distractions and to have done our homework of what makes a good story that she just wants to stay up way past her bedtime reading. So those are some places to start. And there's always more to learn, but don't overthink and believe that you have to know everything and have your MA in fiction writing before you start. Just get into it. You learn as you go.
That's such great advice. I was reading about how you grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and I was thinking about the fact that, we think about these great stories, the backdrop being New York City and Paris and all this, but I was thinking about how some of my greatest stories have come from running around in my backyard and chasing kittens and the fort in Enid, Oklahoma and Lake Jackson, Texas, and, things like that. Even for the woman who is living in small town USA, can you talk about how the love of Des Moines, Iowa, and being in a smaller place, how that love for storytelling can grow even in a small place, even someone who feels unseen, even someone who thinks, can my creativity be sparked here where I am, where I feel like the story is growing inside of me, but no one sees it?
Yes, you have your feet planted in a beautiful spot. And it's a spot that's what makes it beautiful. I think we so undervalue what's right around us, right? We think, well, we have to have a highfalutin or just grandiose vision. I need to set this story in Budapest. I've always heard Budapest is a wonderful place for a story. I've never even been to Budapest. So I would say, don't count yourself out for the geography of where you are. There's an old maxim of writing about what you know. Obviously, we don't want to only write about, if you write only what you know, it's memoir. You got to throw some elbows and use your mind and your feet sometimes to research and find other spaces that will come alive on the page. But I think oftentimes we skip over what is natural and normal and daily to us, to our peril. Again, that goes for nonfiction and fiction. What's most dear to you? What are the stories you tell and retell over and over? What are the things that come up around campfire over and over at your family gatherings or your friend gatherings? Those are average to you, but your reader has never heard those. Put them on paper. See what happens. See what happens when something that is your Wednesday morning becomes a scene. Really great stuff can happen there. One of the books that I wrote was set both in Iowa and New York. Actually, Lisa, the main character was a fashion designer, so you can add fashion designer to all the other things you're going to do next. She started a company called Flyover, which was kind of a nod to how we are known as the flyover states. And so she was living in New York, but she would head back to Iowa actually as well. And the editor of that book, we had the funniest conversations because she too is a New Yorker, originally from the Midwest. And she had hilarious things that she would say that other people on the team would point out. Like, in this scene where the main character's driving, is she in overalls? Is she chewing hay? When she's in Iowa, does she see a lot of abandoned warehouses? I was like, what is happening? And most notable, it was just like a new world to them. By the way, all the questions were no to those. I have not ever chewed hay in my whole darn life. I have lived in a city of 500,000 people, not a lot of hay. My favorite was for the cover mock-up. This is a true story, okay? Probably not supposed to say it. I don't know if I'm beyond the statute of limitations. The first mock-up of the cover, they showed to other New Yorkers, and it was this smattering of stars and this couple on the bottom of the frame. And they got feedback over and over saying, what are those lights in the sky? And this cover, they honestly kept asking, is this about an alien invasion? This book. And my editor from Missouri said, no, those are stars. Those are stars in the sky. There's no invasion. This is actually a fairly lighthearted romance. So I'm just saying, what's normal to you, maybe it's the Big Dipper. Write it in, because to somebody else, that could be the most foreign subculture. And we love reading about other people's lives. So don't discount yours. Yours is actually really interesting.
It's so true. It's so good. Well, it has been a delight to have you on here, Kim. We have loved it. Kimberly Stewart, such a great author and speaker, and you have a coaching business that you do. And so where can people find you as we close this time together?
The best place is KimberlyStewart.com, or I hang out on Instagram at Kimberly.Stewart.writes.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was so much fun.
Thanks for joining us today on the Called Creatives podcast. Hey, if you want to finally write that book, be sure to download the free book proposal that we've created for you at calledcreatives.com/book-proposal. Happy writing.